Of the 8 playable characters in Elden Ring Nightreign, Executor is one that I've seen people put extremely high on tier lists and more frequently dead last on their tier lists. I don't think he's even a consideration for the most innately powerful class, and yet in my 200 hours of gameplay I have run 245 expeditions and 129 of those have been as Executor. The reason for this is because though he's probably like a B or C tier character in terms of power and impact, to me he's far and away the most fun character to play. In case you haven't caught on, I am an avid fan of Sekiro. Executor's deflects are the cornerstone of his character and are far more thought out than the deflects in Elden Ring's DLC, and far less thought out than the deflects in Sekiro. If you're familiar with Sekiro and have tried out Executor's skill in Nightreign, you may understand why some of these differences are impactful. First of all, stance makes a significantly bigger difference in Sekiro than in Elden Ring or in Nightreign. The reward for whittling down your opponent's stance in Sekiro is an opportunity to perform an instant killing death blow, and every deflect you perform diminishes your opponent's stance. This means that in some cases in Sekiro, you can defeat your enemies by only blocking and turning their aggression against them until you create the opportunity to deliver one lethal strike. This is my favorite feature of Sekiro and my favorite system of sword fighting in any video game ever. Often video games don't think very hard about the strengths and weaknesses of wielding a sword, and struggle to incentivize blocking with your sword in a way that includes the inherent risk and danger of a sword fight and the reward of reacting well and with discipline to your opponent. This is what makes Sekiro so fun, and it's what makes playing Executor so fun. When you practice and learn this unique video game combat style, you have the same kinds of interplays and back and forths as you would as an experienced sword fighter or duelist. I'm not going to pretend that this Sekiro system is the pinnacle of realistic combat in games, but to me it's the pinnacle of fun combat in games. And even more so than Dark Souls and Elden Ring's rolling system, it takes a step away from the mindless button mashing and spamming that plagues combat all over the video game industry. This is why I have more than half of my gameplay spent playing Executor. To me, that added option is just so fun and exciting. There are some fundamental differences between Sekiro and Elden Ring, and one of the biggest ones is that Sekiro is really designed to perfect and master one singular style of combat, whereas Elden Ring goes the opposite direction and tries to cater to way more options. Because of this, every single enemy in Sekiro feels designed to interact with him in smart and intentional ways, whereas in Nightreign, Executor is one of the 8 playable characters in the game, and many of the encounters you will face as him are not designed for his unique playstyle. This is part of why you can one-shot enemies in Sekiro after the reward of extremely effective blocking, and in Nightreign, the extent of your reward for deflecting is a stance break and critical hit. If Executor could one-shot bosses, the game would be so much more anticlimactic for the other 2 players. And so, the deflect is ultimately a severely watered-down version of the deflect from Sekiro, sometimes even feeling awkward, clumsy, or entirely out of place. Because Executor becomes more powerful the more aggressive enemies are, and you play as one of 3 players, it's frequent that bosses aren't even looking at you, as your teammates are likely to outdamage you, and so your hopes to deflect and gain benefit from your skill can feel like an afterthought or waste of effort, when you could be more tanky as one of the other melee classes or provide higher DPS as one of the ranged classes. As soon as I started playing Nightreign, I knew that Executor was the character who would appeal to me the most, but my first looks at the character made me think he was extremely underwhelming. He had a skill that was core to his gameplay and felt poorly applied to multiplayer and seldom incentivized in the game. Not only did the skill feel like a letdown after playing Sekiro, but it also had the added bonus of slowing down your character when it was out. Now, it probably sounds like I hate this character and am a masochist, but only one of those statements are true. Let me remind you that I think this character is the most fun character in the game, and that this character occupies more than half of the obscene amount of time I've spent playing this game. Executor's skill is absolutely sweet, but the number one thing to learn about it is application. As I expressed before, it is best used when your enemies are extremely aggressive and extremely aggressive towards you particularly. In other words, because enemies are more likely to focus on you when you are doing higher damage, Executor is most effective when you are either putting in the hustle to out-damage your teammates or you are alone. which kind of fits his design but is not always advisable. Do not take fights alone if you are not confident you can win them. If you go off and die on your own, it's not the end of the world, but it is time wasted in a game where time is precious, and you become the problem teammate. A good executor who has learned the character well is seldom the problem player, and seldom the player who is first to be knocked down. Don't be afraid to be bad at the character though, as everyone is that guy sometimes. Definitely me. You definitely can go off on your own as Executor, however, and Executor is one of the greatest characters in the game to do this, as he is far less reliant on your teammates than other characters. But remember, it's important to do this in cases where you can confidently handle yourself. Because of traumatizing experiences.
Is that 2 Crucible Knights? Let me out! Let me out! Boys, no, let me out of here! Out of there, Daniel! Oh no! Leave him alone, he's just a baby! No!
Because of some kind of traumatizing experience or something, I'm really familiar with the attack patterns of Crucible Knights. Because of that, I feel entirely confident going to the castle and fighting Crucies all on my own, and that can often be a valuable asset to my team in gathering runes if we're not all coordinated, or stabilizing a fight with surety if we are all together. Ironically, it's much harder to fight Crucible Knights as ranged characters, because their shields are harder to get around from the distance that's otherwise advantageous, but Executor and Wilder with his starting buckler excel at fighting them because they can really use their abilities to have interplay and create opportunities in those fights. Also, because Executor is good at playing without support, he is a great character as an initiator, which is nice because you can make decisions and begin fights without being forced to communicate through the currently shoddy ping system. A lot of the time when I play Recluse or someone like that, I will forget that I am not the best person to arrive first to the fight, and am more vulnerable and will get swarmed or one-shotted before my teammates arrive to help me. Executor's skill offers a lot of personal defensive options that make him way stronger, but again, you have to learn application. You don't use it all the time, as there are many times you need to run or output higher damage, but it is an incredible tool for personal defense and interactive fighting, and is extremely nice to have in your back pocket. It is not, however, the end-all be-all in his kit, and you are encouraged to pick up and use other weapons. Use other stuff when you're chasing an enemy down or want to provide higher damage with him. When your sword is out, you can move a little bit faster by pressing the dodge button and kind of shimmying forward, but that uses stamina, and it's actually entirely free and actually quite safe to just put away your sword. And if you want to put it away quickly on the move, you can do so by pressing the Spirit Sprint button. Alright, I've talked a bit about what Executor does and how and when to use him, but I want to go into a deeper dive on why he is actually quite good and what he really does. Let's compare his deflecting sword to the dodge roll that is a staple in every Soulsborne game, and that he also has access to. They might seem quite different, but they are both, after all, precisely timed defensive tools that prevent damage and have frames where you are rewarded for their use and frames where you're punished. When I was first learning Executor, since the reward for deflecting seemed mostly to be less consequential stance damage, it seemed like the pros were minuscule compared to the cons. But here's what I came to discover while paying closer attention to Executor. While there are things that a roll can do that a deflect can't, here's some of the strengths and different features that deflects have over rolls. So an important thing to remember is that these different consequences of deflecting are beneficial during different times, or in other words, application is important. And that list is to help you figure that out, but ultimately gameplay, practice, trial, and error are the best things to teach you when to use this character. As an Executor player, you will benefit from using both dodges and deflects, and they both have their place, and both weave together to create versatile and fluid gameplay. You don't lose the benefits of dodge rolling that every character has by playing Executor. You just gain the benefits of deflecting that only Executor has. It's tricky at first to learn what to use and when, but you really can benefit from his character, though it may seem minor at first. An example of this is that when I was fighting Adele, Baron of Night, I think I would often get hit far more by his grab attacks than my teammates, because I was so focused on deflecting and would forget to roll. But also, when the Darkdrift Knight was Everdark Sovereign last week, I remember an instance where he did his giant nuke move and no one on my team reacted fast enough to evade it. Everyone died except for me because I had my fricking sword out when the nuke hit, and I lost my entire stamina bar instead of my entire health bar. That is a drastic example, but it can definitely come in handy. A more pertinent example of the skill's strength is visible from going back to the Crucible Knight example. Deflecting gives you way faster recovery times than rolling, allowing you to be defensive and then offensive with much higher fluidity. Now that I've gone over what's good about this character's strengths, I want to talk about how you can maneuver his weaknesses. Like I said, the slow is very prevalent when you activate his sword. I think that they really wanted it to not entirely take the place of scavenging for improved weapons and upgrades, and how you address this is simple. Don't use it all the time. Most of the time while you're running around, you won't have it out. In fact, I'd say if you included traversal time and the entirety of gameplay, you probably will want to use the Cursed Sword for like less than 5% of the run total. And within combat, it really depends on what you're fighting and what weapons you have, but you want to mitigate that slowed move speed as much as possible. Attacking with the Cursed Sword does quite decent damage actually, and the game doesn't tell you this, but it hardly uses stamina at all. So you can swing it for pretty much forever, which I think makes it great for if you're fighting something and don't need to go anywhere, or if you want to res someone. But again, you can whip it out and put it away for free, and with actually incredible safety. The reason why it's so safe is that you actually get deflect frames just by pushing the button and getting it out or putting it away. You can get great usage out of your skill just by doing this, but if I'm going to use it, it often will be in a situation where I'd like to swing it somewhat too. So I'll often have it out for a little while at a time. Getting it out can also be an extra defensive tool even if you aren't currently using it, because it is so instantaneous. There have been plenty of times when I don't have time to roll to react to something, and being able to pull it out in a flash saves me from getting hit, and then I have it ready to deflect with normally. Now, I've told you about what to do to make use of the skill, and I've told you that you don't always want to have the skill active, but I haven't talked about what you do in the times that you don't have the Suncatcher out. The answer is fairly simple, which is that you play Executor like you would any other Elden Ring character. You dodge and you hit. Something to talk about in regards to that is just picking what weapons are best for Executor while you're on your run. And I was planning on going into a huge discussion about like scalers and how status effects interact with Executor's high arcane stat, but this video is already way longer than I want it to be, so I think I'll just shorten it to say status effects are extremely effective and especially effective under Executor, and these are some of my favorite weapons to use with him. Now I'd like to start wrapping up by talking about the last two things that make Executor unique, namely his passive ability and his ultimate. His passive says, receive boost while recovering from status ailments. And I want to tell you guys something. I have run 129 expeditions as Executor, and during those I have been affected by every status in the book. And I have absolutely no clue what this boost means or what it means to be recovering from status ailments. I'm just gonna pretend that the passive just says at any moment you can block anything and feel awesome. Now the ult I know more about, and I want to say it's kind of crappy, which it is, and like a lot of things was initially a major turnoff for me. But I've actually been finding a use for it that I really like that I want to tell you guys about. So the ult turns you into this big dog, right? And while you're in this big dog mode, you have a couple of different things you can do. You can bark with right click. Some relics make it so that barking heals you in dog mode, and it does a massive long-range AoE attack. This is a nice option to pull out because one of Executor's biggest weaknesses is that he doesn't naturally have ways to handle a whole lot of enemies that easily. This is funny to me because it feels like you play the entire game so precisely and then you ult and say, I'm Winston, I want tacos, and go freaking doggy mode bonkers. Then you have this strong attack, which is a much slower, wider swing that can hit twice and then slam down. You can also jump and do doggy jump attacks. And last of all, you can hit your Ash of War button, it's control for me. and do this massive swing that does a ton of poise damage and a little bit of actual damage. Using this will automatically end your ult, which lasts for a short duration. Now, I found my new favorite button to press during Executor's ult that I haven't seen anyone else press when they're playing them, and you're not gonna believe what it does. My favorite button is the ultimate activation button, and what this does is it cancels your ult. Now you guys must be thinking that I'm crazy at this point and that I've become so deranged that I've lost my mind, but let me tell you something. When you're on foot, you have the most self-defense capabilities in the game, but when you're a dog, you have nothing but your big old health bar, and like bosses and enemies, all of a sudden you can become stance broken. The only difference between you getting stance broken and bosses is that bosses have moves that regularly can hit you 1,000,000 times and stun lock you until you're dead, and when you die as a giant beaver, you die in real life. Because of this, the number of times that I've ulted, done a tiny bit of damage, and then gotten shredded into a fine red mist is too high to count. Some of you might be asking, why even have an ult at all if you don't even use it? And that's the cool trick that I've figured out, which is that when you activate the ult, you push the button and become instantly invulnerable to all damage, and you get healed to more than your maximum health bar. In other words, your ult is the safest, most guaranteed panic button in the game. And as an added bonus to doing my silly cancel strat, using it initially actually only uses part of your ult gauge, and it ticks down the longer it's up. And if you choose to cancel it early, you still get to keep like a whole third of the ult charge. So of course there are times that it's actually really nice to have access to a frothing beast with huge health and massive AoE damage, but you can pop this ult like candy over and over again as a heal button, or to get teammates up safely with your big health bar, or even if you don't want to worry about finding a safe opportunity to drink a flask. And if you run a relic like this one that gives you ult charge when you deflect, you can ult 2, maybe 3 or 4 times in a fight to get a full heal, maybe res a teammate and become the character who has the most self-healing longevity in the game. You also can't be affected by most statuses when you ult, so unless you want to intentionally proc Deathblight to activate your passive, you can just ult to keep yourself safe from that too. The other good use for the ult is when you still have it left at the end of a good run, and you can pop it and have a frolicking doggy celebration and be the goodest boy. The last thing to talk about is relics, and I want to encourage people to try their own builds and be creative, but if you're really struggling, the most tried and true and probably still the most broken setup I've seen is you use any chalice that can equip 2 yellow relics and anything else, and then you use the relics from the Sentient Pest fight and the Fisher in the Fog fight, and anything else for the last slot. This will create the most broken setup ever with just those 2 relics, where you turn your starting weapon from mid to actually the most absurd thing in the game. Your sword will now innately apply poison and blood loss, and when you activate your weapon skill, the Freezing Mist one, it will also deal frost damage. And then you will have a weapon that can deal 3 status effects at the same time, give you 2 bonuses that increase your damage by 20% and turn you invisible, still with an extra relic slot open. I'm not joking, and I'm also pretty certain that this is the only instance in any Souls game where you've been able to have a weapon that can apply 3 statuses at once. For your last relic in this build, you can run a red, blue, or yellow relic if you have one of the following chalices. And some of my favorite relics that anyone can get access to are the Golden Sprout, which is earned at the end of Executor's questline, this Grand Burning Scene, which I'm pretty sure anyone can buy in the shop after completing a few bosses, or either of these extremely powerful Grand Luminous Scenes, which you can buy with Sovereign Sigils at this other shop after defeating an Everdark Sovereign. All of these options are extremely powerful and useful, and I've also been experimenting with the improved critical hit ones you get from killing the Gaping Jaw, both as a normal boss and as an Everdark Sovereign. With all of that information, I hope that this video helps someone find an easier time getting success and value out of Executor. I think it is easy to become daunted by complicated or difficult characters in these games, but the beauty of them is that if someone can beat these games without taking damage on a DK jungle beat bongo controller with their bare fists or whatever people are doing, it means that most any tools can make for a viable playstyle. Even if Executor isn't meta, if you enjoy playing him like I do, go for it. I have so much fun playing him, and the Iron Eye mains can curse me all they want when I run off and die by myself. Sometimes I pull off something awesome and that makes me happy. I realize that this is a way longer and more involved video than I've usually done, but if you've watched it all, I wish you luck and appreciate your patience. Thanks for watching.